Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Learn with Jason. Today on the show, we've brought on Bramus. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Jason. And you?
I'm doing great. How was that pronunciation? I heard you say it. I was like, I'm going to get this just right.
Oh, the trick is, I have a few pronunciations. So I either say Bramus with a long A or I say Bramus. And then in English, it becomes something like promise or Bramus or Bramus or. So.
It's unfortunate. I have the American problem of being completely unable to roll an R. So everything just sounds like I've got marbles in my mouth. All right. Well,
The good thing is, I work with mostly American people and English-speaking people, so I'm used to it. No worries.
you're used to just having your name completely butchered. I apologize. Okay, so all right, so I am so excited to have you on the show. This is going to be a lot of fun. We're talking about one of my favorite things in the entire world, which is playing around with CSS, and I just can't wait. But before we talk about that, let's talk a little bit about you. So for folks who aren't familiar with you and your work, do you want to give us a bit of a background on yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Bramus, or Bramus, it depends. And I'm a Chrome Developer Relations Engineer at Google, and I'm involved mainly with CSS and Web UI. So that's all of the new CSS stuff that is coming, but also some new Web UI stuff, for example, the select list item, the details element that's getting like some love, and it's going to ship like soonish, well, hopefully. So yeah, that's what I'm concerned with. And before that, I always was a web developer. Like the past 20-ish years, I've always been doing web development, backend, front end, and whatnot. But my passion was always CSS. So yeah, that's what eventually got me in at Google, and that's what I'm doing now. That's my day-to-day job.
I love it. I actually can't imagine something that I would enjoy more than being able to collect a paycheck to play with CSS and like stress test it and make it better for the platform. So you're doing one of my dream jobs over there. So I'm actually I'm curious because I feel like, and this is not me trying to start a debate because I know this is kind of a touchy topic, but like there's that sort of pervasive belief that CSS is somehow less than when it comes to writing other programming languages. And that's never sat right with me because I feel like of all the things that have challenged me, getting CSS to do the thing that I see in my head is so much more of a programming exercise to me than when I'm trying to, make logic work in JavaScript or something like that. So as you've sort of made this your career, how deep does the rabbit hole go on CSS? You've been doing it for years now. Like, do you feel like you're done? You've learned it all, or like how much further is there to go?
I feel like I need to learn. I still need to learn like a ton of stuff. It's only when you start like digging into certain things. Now also part of my job that you start learning all like the little details and intricacies about something. The cascade, for example. Like the cascade, it's part of the name, right? Cascading style sheets, and it's only until you really start digging deep that you're like, oh, but there's this like little detail over here, and oh, so that's how it works. Because before I always thought the cascade, well, yeah, you have something with the origins, and you have specificity, some numbers, and that's it. Well, there's quite a lot to learn about it, and that's just that little part of CSS, because CSS has exploded over the years with many new specs coming, like grid layout, flexbox layout, view transitions, scroll different animations, all the positioning things that you can do. So yeah, it's a very, very deep rabbit hole to go into.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is sort of what I've been noticing for myself, at least, is that I felt for a long time when I was younger that there was kind of like a point where you would be done learning something, where you could learn it and you would I don't know, hit the end of the manual or something, and as long as you knew all the things that were in the manual, you'd be like, okay, I'm finished. I know this forever now. And as reality set in, as I got deeper and deeper into my career, I just realized that even if you are the leading expert on a certain subject, there is still always one more thing to learn. And then when you learn that thing, it opens a question, and then that's one more thing to learn. And you can never really run out of things to learn or try. And as people, use a thing, it evolves. And that's actually been one of the most fascinating things for me to watch is from the late 90s, when I first became aware of the web and of building websites, to the early 2000s when I started doing it professionally, to today, CSS has gone from not existing to becoming something that was, I would say, rudimentary in the early 2000s. It was like, it does enough. We can get some font changes, we can get some colors. To today, I saw somebody built a Morse code decoder in pure CSS. It absolutely melted my brain trying to figure out how it worked. And we're seeing stuff like, people are building these incredible 3D models. They're building unbelievable things. People like Lynn Fisher are doing CSS art. People are building full-blown like oil painting lookalikes in CSS. And I saw some work from you when Una was on the show recently, where she was showing me a bunch of scroll-driven animations that were built completely in CSS. And if you told me 3 years ago that you were going to try to build a CSS animation in pure CSS, or a scroll-driven animation in pure CSS, I would assume that you didn't know how the web worked. Like, there's no way, you can't do that. It's impossible. And yet, here we are, and it's working. So tell us a little bit about this. Like, how? I mean, first of all, like I kind of made an assumption that scroll-driven is the biggest thing you focused on. But like, what are you finding to be the most exciting parts of CSS as it's evolved over the last few years?
The most exciting parts, I think, are the non-default uses of a certain technology. Like you've mentioned Lynn Fisher, you've mentioned the oil paintings, for example. But I see that Jane is also in the chat. Like, for example, they launched the space toggle hack, which uses registered custom properties, but then you give it a value of space versus initial, and it's like a switch that you can flip on or off. And that invention, because it is an invention, led to many more other things that you can do with CSS. And that's so cool. The same thing with scroller animations, for example. You've already mentioned it, but it allows you to do way more than scroll-driven animations. So maybe more on that later in the show. Some of the odd use cases for scroll-driven animation.
I have actually never heard of this space toggle, and now, Jane, if you want to come teach me things, hit me up, because I would love to learn about this invention. So scrolling is kind of intrinsically an action that, to me, feels like it is outside of the style, right? But it does affect the way that the page looks, because you're moving things up and down. And a huge part of CSS recently has been figuring out ways to manage transitions, figuring out ways to do keyframe animations. And this is, to me, this has been a very interesting, like, where do you draw the line between what should and should not be in CSS? And so you've been in this world for a while. Like, how did this conversation go when the discussion about trying to get scroll triggers into CSS, like, was it kind of a unanimous, like, yeah, that makes sense, or was there a lot of pushback, like, no, we shouldn't bring that sort of thing into the spec?
Yeah, so the initial discussions on this predate my time at Google, because I dug a bit, like, because now I have access to some internal docs, and like some of the earliest conversations date back to more than 5 years ago. The engineers were already thinking about it at the time, and it was part of the Houdini effort, where they wanted like an animation worklet to do something. Oh yes, and you could attach it to scroll as well, and that like kind of made the thing. But that little part went nowhere. Well, that big chunk went nowhere, but the small part of scroll-driven animations, like that idea, still continued to move on and get evolved. And like I think 3 years ago, we had a working implementation using an add scroll timeline rule, but then the CSS working group was like, that feels very un-CSS-y. Like you could see that it was a JavaScript type of solution, and that was then transformed to, oh, we need to do this in CSS. Let's invent an add scroll timeline rule by which you can create a new instance of a scroll timeline. It was like a literal JavaScript to CSS translation. But then the CSS working group was like, no, we need to rewrite things. And that's around the time when I joined Google. So I've been on board and part of the spec writing process and giving like suggestions like, oh, maybe this should be easier and this should be done. And we have it now. It's shipped in Chrome 1.15, which is amazing, I think.
Yeah, and is this, I guess, as a first level setting, is this something that I can use cross browser right now?
So the answer is no, because Chrome right now is the only browser to support it. Firefox, however, is working on an implementation, so that's very good news. And then WebKit, so Safari, have expressed their support for the API. So they said like, okay, we like this API, or we can agree that it's useful, and maybe someday we'll implement it. That's basically what they are saying. So it's no guarantee that we will have it this year or next year. Who knows? Time will tell.
Gotcha.
It's only supported in Chrome, but all browser vendors are on board, which is one very good thing. And then the other great thing about scroll-driven animations is that mostly I use them as a progressive enhancement. They are not essential to how the website should work. So if my CSS doesn't load or my browser doesn't support scroll-driven animations, well, then you still get to see the style thing, but it won't animate on scroll. And that's not that bad, I think.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so I realized I just jumped right into talking about the history of this, and I never actually asked you to define what it is. So for somebody who's just hearing this term for the first time, what is a scroll-driven animation?
The name kind of should say itself, but let's go into details there. So it's an animation driven by scroll. So think of a CSS animation or one created using the Web Animations API. And when you use it and you go to a page, you have a web animation on there or CSS animation, it will load and start running and the document timeline. So when the page loads, the document timeline starts at 0 and then goes 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, and so on. And with scroll-driven animations, you say like, hey, don't run this animation on the document timeline, but run it on a certain scroll timeline. And that means that if you are at the very top of your scroller, you're at 0% progress. And if you scroll all the way to the end of your scroller, you're at 100% of your scroll progress. So your animation will move as you scroll up and down. Ergo the name scroll-driven animation.
This is what I love about this is that it gives us this capability as devs to have have an animation that's not just kind of playing on a loop, but it's moving as the user moves. And if you go down the page a little bit and then back up, the animation will kind of like go back and forth with you. And we've seen this in like product demos, where you look at the classic like Apple marketing style page where as you scroll down the page, the computer like spins into view and then zooms in and zooms out. And previously, these were absolutely monstrous pages. Like they were huge, multiple megabytes, tons of JavaScript. And, part of that is because the images are enormous and like you can't make images small when they're that high res. Well, you can, but that's a different topic. So with that being said, like a lot of it was dedicated to loading these big JavaScript libraries. And then you have to do a lot of like observing the window and looking at where the user is, and it gets very heavy. And so what you're saying is that with this scroll-driven animation, if I want to make one of those where I'm doing a product demo and I've got stuff spinning around and zooming in and zooming out, I could do this on my own site without JavaScript now?
Yeah, exactly. And the cool thing is that because these scroll-driven animations, they work in conjunction with the existing CSS animations and web animations. And those animations already know how to run things on the compositor, so off the main thread. which means that you will have more time for all your other JavaScript to run. Because like you said before, you needed to have like a scroll progress listener, which uses some blocking JavaScript and then needs to take the scroll offset. Oh yeah, you're this far into the page, so that's this much percent and so on. You no longer need that. It will scroll driven animations will like take care of it all of that for you, which is amazing.
And it also I can picture a few things that have stopped me from doing really intense scroll-driven animations in the past, like responsive styling for it and things that, when you're doing it in JavaScript, you're like trying to re-implement features of CSS to make sure that it fits within the window, to make sure that it's visible, to make sure that it's, the right width, that the aspect ratio is not messed up. And if you're in CSS, if I have, I'm animating a div, and I know that the thing inside of that div is sized properly, then I can just animate that thing and know that my CSS is going to apply to it. And like, I'm not trying to take my CSS out of the style sheet and into the animation tools, like custom styling thing that I hope works the same way. and
Exactly.
It really just, it feels like kind of coming home as somebody who's building a lot of, in my case, very silly, but still like fairly ambitious. Like I want to make something fun happen when you see this website. And I love that you can do so much more of this just using web standards, and I'm not, loading. And like, I love GSAP. I don't want to, no shade on it at all, but it's nice that I only need GSAP for my really advanced ideas as opposed to having to reach for it when I want to do anything at all. Which just feels, sometimes it's a little heavy when I'm like, oh, I just want this thing to move from here to here when you scroll down the page, and I don't want to load GSAP to do that.
And because it taps into CSS, you can use it's just a bunch of properties and values that you set, but you can integrate into prefers reduced motion media query, into another media query that says, hey, if the screen is like very narrow, animate in a different way. It's all just in CSS that you can do it. Do note, I'm focusing on the CSS part here. If you want, you can also have it integrate with the Web Animations API, which is a JavaScript way of using the same mechanics. So you can do both, but I prefer the CSS way.
Yeah, I guess it's like another tool to have in the belt, which is there's no better way to be than just prepared, right? If you know how all these things work, then you can choose the solution that's going to get you the result you want in the least amount of work, the least amount of jank for the users, the least amount of maintenance effort in an ongoing fashion. So a good thing to learn and understand, because, especially these days, everybody's expecting websites to do a lot. Where our expectations are getting really high for what a good website is and what a good website feels like. So these sorts of tools being built into the browser, that's a big opportunity for us to level up without having to take that out of the performance budget or take that out of the experience of users on less performant devices, because as you said, it's a progressive enhancement. Like if they don't have a device that supports these, really, really big deal animations or whatever, we can detect that. We can not run the animation and just show them a perfectly reasonably looking, like good looking site that doesn't have stuff flying all over the screen. And I just love that. It is wonderful. You
want to see an example?
Absolutely, I want to see an example. All right, let me switch us over into the pair programming view here. Let me get this over here, and then I'm going to move this onto the screen, and here we go. All right, so before you start, I'm going to do a quick shout out to our sponsors and our live captioning. So we've got White Coat Captioning. Amanda's here with us today, doing the closed captioning for this show. If you want to see that, just click that little closed caption button that's right down there, and that is made possible through the support of our sponsors. We've got Netlify and Vetsu Code, both kicking in to make this show more accessible to more people, which I very much appreciate. We are talking to Bramus, who is, let's see, what's the right place to send people if I want to point them to you on the web? Are you using
Twitter, or X, I should say, sorry. Bramus is my username. and also my website, bram.us.
What a
where I
good,
publish
what a
things.
good website. That's a good domain. I love that.
Thanks.
Okay, so this is you. Let's find the scroll CSS. What am I looking for? Probably is it like not scroll behavior? I want.
You want, well, you want a few properties, but maybe the easiest thing to do is go to scroll-driven-animations.style.
Scroll-driven animations.style.
Style. And there I have like a full page with everything on there. So if you scroll, you already see a scroll-driven animation. Did you see the mouse move?
Yeah, and like, look, as I'm moving up and down, it moves with me, right? It's not like a trigger once and then it's done. It's very much like a part of the site. And these scrolling in as it
here
goes.
with the cards
So
that
good.
reveal themselves as you scroll.
I love it. All right.
And so the basic one that you want to check out there is the reading progress indicator. I think that is like a really good starting example.
Okay. So you can see up here, we've got, as we scroll down the page, it's showing how much of the page is left to read. Which
exactly.
this was all the rage. I think I saw 3 or 4 independent JavaScript libraries that got published that were like, hey, install this package to get a reading progress indicator at the top of your site. And now we can do this in CSS. And if I had to guess, I'm going to take a wild guess that building this particular interaction is something like 10 lines of CSS.
For the animation part, it's even less than that. Yeah, you need some positioning and whatnot, but yeah, it's only a few lines of CSS that you need.
Yeah, and it's wonderful.
Let's start off with the easy one. If you go to like the little switcher icon there at the bottom, so go back to the reading progress indicator. Yeah, and you have a switcher icon. Yeah, click on that one, and then go for number 4. That's the easiest one. The anonymous scroll. Yeah, there's like a few ways of approaching a scroll-driven animation, and this is the easy one. And if you now click on the info icon, you should get like a little explanation of how is this thing built.
Whoa.
Of course, you could check it out with DevTools, but this is like me writing down, this is how it works. So I can walk you through it. But maybe we should use DevTools to inspect it.
I mean, this is great. Like this is so cool to see. And I mean, just looking at this, like this is how I expect an animation to work. We scale it on the x-axis, so left to right, down to 0. And that's when you start. And then when you're done, it's scaled up to its normal size, which is full width. And this, we stick it up to the top and left. We make it 100% wide, give it a height of 1 rem. And then just look at this. Like, this is beautiful. We just say, grow, like use this animation, and we tell it to use the scroll instead of the regular timer. Like, this is a brilliant solution because it doesn't feel like it changed what I know about CSS. It's something that I could have built that would have looped as like a growing bar, and then you just change out the timeline, and suddenly it's a completely different thing. And it feels good. Like you mentioned earlier that the original implementation was like JavaScript being kind of ported into CSS. Mm-hmm. This feels like CSS to me.
Yeah, exactly. And it says you mentioned, like you start off with your existing CSS, your existing animation. If you have that one working and it runs like on over a certain time, the thing that you need to do is like, there's basically 2 things that you need to do is 1, you remove the animation duration, or you replace it with a value of auto, which you can see here in the animation shorthand. And then secondly, you add an animation timeline to it. And from then on, it will run on an animation timeline. But of course, there's like a few tweaks that you can do, like which scroll timeline do you want. But by default, what the scroll function will do is it will look up the nearest scrolling parent of the element that you are targeting. So from the progress element up, it will look at all the parent elements, and the nearest one that has a scroller, that one will be used to drive the scrolling. And in this case, it's just the document scrolling. because the progress div is a direct child of the body, and then the body is a child of the HTML. So you have your root scroller, your document scroller.
Amazing. It's so good. This makes me so happy. And then, so you implemented a few different versions of this. So
if you go to version 3, for example.
Okay.
Yeah. And then it's the same demo, so it's the same output, but only the code is a little bit different. And what you see here is that for the animation-timeline, we have passed in 2 arguments in there, block and nearest. And then block is a direction which you want to track. So it's the block direction, which is in our Western world, it's from top to bottom.
Okay.
And you can, if you want, you can also pass an inline in there so that it goes horizontally.
Oh.
So that it tracks a different axis so that you're scrolling horizontally, but now you're scrolling vertically. So you have block, inline, horizontal, and vertical. Those are like one of the 4 keywords that you can use for that. And then the last keyword is which scroller you want to track. And by default, it's going to be the nearest parent. So this is basically the default value here.
Okay.
But you can also say root or self. And then root will always map to the root scroller. So if you have like a scroller inside of a scroller, but you still want to scroll track the document, you pass in root. And then self is to mean track myself as I am scrolling. For example, if you want to change a background or something like that. I hope that was clear.
Yeah. That is clear. That's okay. So do you want to keep looking at demos, or do you want to walk me through building a few of these?
Well, maybe we can take a look at the carousel step indicator, and then one with view timeline, and then we can like build something, right?
Okay.
So here I have a carousel, but if you scroll through it horizontally, the progress bar will also move. So like I just mentioned, you have the scroll function. So in the arguments there, you would pass in inline because it tracks the inline, the inline axis of the scroller. But I did something else here as well. I gave the scroll timeline a name. So that's what you also can do. So you have this scroll function to say like, hey, create me an anonymous scroll timeline instance. It's basically that. But if you want, you can be very explicit about it and say, hey, this scroller over here, I'm going to give it a scroll timeline name, which is -- and then its name.
Okay.
With a value of inline. And then you use that name as the animation timeline further down. So instead of the function, you pass in the name that you have given to the thing.
Got it. Okay. All right. I think I understand, and so this is something different than what you would do. Like, it's still scrolling, but it feels like a kind of a unique use case here. All right, so I'm going to back out. What else would you like to look at?
And then maybe one with, let's take the image reveal effects, the one in the center. That's like a classic one as well. And if you hit the little switch icon again, at the bottom right, go to the number 2 there, the anonymous view timeline. Yeah. Okay. So this is also a scroll-driven animation. The image is revealing. So as you scroll up, the image is revealing itself. But it doesn't use, it uses a special type of scroll timeline. So by default, the scroll timeline is just tracking the scroller. As you scroll from the top to the bottom, you go from 0 to 100%.
Okay.
But this here uses a view timeline, which says track this element as it is entering, as it is like crossing the scroll port, which is kind of like intersection observer, if that rings a bell.
It is, yes. And this is huge because I love intersection observer with my whole heart, and I hate setting up intersection observers because I'm always doing it for something simple like this. So this replacing my entire intersection observer setup code, my life just improved in a very tangible way. This is amazing.
Awesome.
I am so blown away by this. I actually didn't So when Eunice showed me this site, we looked at it for a minute. I didn't realize I could see the source code here, so I was like, I need to come back and look and like inspect this later. But I didn't want to derail the show. So I'm really excited that this button is here where I can just kind of look at these and see. This is incredible. Like I did not know that view was an option, and that is going to change a lot of how I think about what I can build on the web, because I don't have to set up an intersection observer now. I can just run that and do a bunch of fun things as they scroll into view. Oh,
yeah, exactly.
Good stuff.
It's so powerful because it's like one line of CSS and it works.
Oh man, this is what I'm talking about with like the improvements in the platform. Is we like, as a developer, I don't really want to have to write arcane code to make the things that are in my head a reality. And when I was younger, I had a lot of ideas for like, oh, it'd be cool if this was interactive like this, or if this was, was hooked up to this interaction or something. And I would just talk myself out of it, because as I started digging into it, the level of complexity to make that real, it was just too high. Like there were too many cross-browser things to consider. It was all written in JavaScript. I had to do my styles in JavaScript. I had like, just stuff broke in ways that I didn't. And I was like, you know what, this feels too janky. I'm just not going to do it. And so good ideas died because I didn't have the bandwidth or the knowledge to like build these very complicated workarounds. And now the browser is just giving us these tools that let us do this sort of thing in a way that doesn't require me to have like intense amounts of knowledge about how each of these things work under the hood. I just know I want to do a thing, which is a CSS animation. I know how to write those. I want to do a CSS animation when this thing comes onto into the viewport. And now I just add one little thing. I want this animation to play in response to the user scrolling up and down the page. Now I can just do that. It feels like such a game changer to me.
I think that's the beauty of CSS being a decorative language. You are like not occupied with all the fine details and all the little knobs. You're just saying like, hey browser, please try and do this, and it will try and do it for you. Oh, amazing.
So good. Okay. Did you want to show any of these others?
There's a bunch of demos. I could talk like for hours on all of these, but let's maybe dive into some code.
All right, let's dive into some code. So would you like to, should we use a CodePen? Should I stand up a local site? What do you think?
Oh, whatever you want. Maybe CodePen is the easiest, and people can
CodePen's nice and easy.
Check out later. Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to set up a CodePen, and we're going to say CSS scroll-driven animations with Bramus. And I can save that. And I think I can... I always forget how to share these. Here we go. This should let anybody who wants to kind of follow along live as we go. That does not make it collaborative, so you'll fork it if you change it. But this will let us get started. And I'm just going to drag that JavaScript right out of the way there, because we're not going to need it today, friends. All right. So what would you like to start with? And I can try to like give us some elements to work with.
Maybe we should try and like recreate an effect on a list where like every list item fades in as it comes into view and then fades out as it goes out of view, because then I can like talk to you about the animation ranges and whatnot.
All right, so let's do that. I will set up a list, and our list is going to have, we can set up like a little image, and maybe we won't start with an image. Maybe we start with like an H2, and we'll say a name, and then we'll have some kind of a description here. And I should probably do some like lorem ipsum copy pasta, but for now we'll just kind of give ourselves some space. And then
exactly, let's copy paste that thing.
Get a bunch of those, and then I can just very quickly do like a list style none. Set a margin of 0, padding of 0, and our list items, we can have them be like, we set like a max width on this as well. Do you have like a very specific way that you write your properties? Like I have to alphabetize them, or my brain wants to short circuit.
Well, I don't alphabetize. I try to group them, but most of the time that works like for the first 5 minutes, and then after that, it like all goes, yeah, it all goes out of control. It's like,
Okay, so here's kind of like a very simple like rudimentary setup.
Yeah, perfect. That's what we need.
And we'll just give it a little centering there. Okay.
All right. So what we basically want to do is that we want to fade in these things as they enter the scroll port. So that's step one that we want to do.
Okay, so I can set up a keyframe, and I'll do opacity 0 to opacity 1, and that's how I would do this. And then if I were to just kind of set this up, I would say like animation fade 1 second, linear, and then that would cause all of these to fade in like that, and then they're done. There's nothing else happens. So to hook this up on scroll,
you remove the duration.
Okay.
So 1 second you throw it out, and then you set animation dash timeline to the value of view, which is the function.
Okay.
And now as you scroll, you will see that they fade in from the moment that they are, it starts like when they are at the very bottom of the scroller. And then by the time they are at the very top, like when they have just exited the scroll port, there they are at opacity 1. So that's what this view timeline does. It creates a range from just underneath to just above. But now we need an extra property. We want to like shrink it down. We want to say like, no, fade in when you are at the bottom, and then you go just at the top, like run to there. And for that, I have a little helper website that will guide you through it. So if you open up scroll-driven animations.style again, I have a little tool on there that will help you.
Okay.
So if you scroll down here on this page, yes, and then the view timeline ranges visualizer, the one on the right.
Okay.
Go to tool, that's the one that you need.
That's handy.
Yeah, now if you click somewhere, the little starting thing will go away. Click to start. Okay. So if you drag the scroll bar, it doesn't scroll, you have to drag it. You can see that it goes from 0 to 100%. That's like the default range. That is the full range.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. And these things have a name. So you have several ranges. You can change it with the drop-down button there at the top right. It says cover. If you change it to contain, for example, then you can see and then the bottom one, set it to mirrored. That's going to be
mirrored.
easiest.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is the contain range. So it also runs from 0 to 100%, but when the item is sitting at the bottom edge until it goes to the top edge.
Got it.
And then we also have another range, which is entry. If you check that one, and you can guess what that one does, it runs the animation from 0 to 100% when it is entering the scroll port.
Got it.
So that's the range that we want to target. We don't want the full range of cover. We want only this entry range. And of course, you also have exit, which is like the one at the top.
Okay. So then for me, that means in here, I want animation,
a new property, animation range.
And do I just like
entry, and that's it.
Okay.
And now every itself will have its own view timeline. So for each li, it will create a view timeline that tracks it. It will run the fade animation during the entry range. And the entry range is by default from just underneath the scroll port to just when it's entirely in view. And you can tweak the numbers if you want.
Why don't we'll make this a little more obvious what's going on by inverting the colors here. I think that'll help. Because then you can kind of see them coming in. And that's cool. So we'd probably want to do a little bit more to make it a bit more obvious when the colors aren't inverted like this. Because it's very subtle right now, which is, I mean, sometimes that's actually like great. You want it to be just subtle enough that you can feel that something's happening, but it doesn't draw a lot of attention to itself.
What I like to do here is that the from position, so the starting position, I want to translate the thing a little bit down so that when it enters, it's like moves up a little bit.
Okay. And to do that, I translate Y, and you want to translate it down.
Translate Y won't work. That property doesn't exist yet. We're talking about it. But so you want translate 0% on the x-axis, and then, for example, 50% or 20% on the y-axis.
Okay.
So to push it a little bit down. And now you can see that it goes up.
Nice.
One tip, by the way, we didn't repeat translate in the to keyframe. That's because the default value for translate is don't translate. And the same thing is with opacity. You see, the default value for opacity is 1, so we can just remove the to block there.
Oh, interesting.
So if you throw it away, it will still work.
Cool. I did not know that.
So that's the entry range. If you want, you can tweak the numbers, because now the element needs to be fully in view. Maybe you don't want that. So you can also tweak the numbers. So you can, instead of just entry, you can say entry space 0%, space entry 50%, for example. Entry 50%. And then the animation will run from when the element is just outside the scroll port up to the point where it's halfway in the scroll port.
Oh, okay.
So it runs a little bit faster. If you want to set it to 150%, for example, that also works. But then it lags a little bit.
And that's great, because now it feels snappy and is like a little more visible what's going on.
What I really like to do, by the way, is that these percentages, they like depend on the size of the element itself. So if you have a shorter element, it's gonna like the animations won't go over the same distance. So what I like to do is I take entry 100%, which is like when it's entirely in view, but I wrap the 100% in a calc function.
Oh, I see.
And then you do calc 100% plus 20 pixels, for example.
Got it.
Everything will, or like 0% minus 150 pixels. You can do calculations in there. It's really cool.
Because then if we take one of these, let's take probably one toward the bottom so that we can see the difference, and make this a lot longer, then instead of feeling...
Yeah, so now it takes longer. So what we can do is the calc one, set it to 0% minus 200 pixels, for example, or maybe plus 200 pixels, so that then it's always a fixed distance of 200 pixels that it will move.
Got it. Okay, so in, and then it's done, even though we're not in view. Oh, yeah. Okay, so this is, this
and
is
it
great.
goes over the same distance. Yeah.
So lots of ways that you can tweak this to make it kind of suit your specific interaction goals.
Yeah, and you can also like combine some of these ranges. So you can do entry 0%, cover 50%. So that way it will animate when it starts from just underneath the scroll port to the very center of the scroll port. And then again, you can calc with this, and you have so many options here. So it only is fitted in when it's at the very center. Yeah.
That's cool. I mean, this is great. And like, you know, this is one of those things that it's subtle. It feels good. It makes you want to kind of keep scrolling a little bit. And so obviously that means that it needs to be used with a little bit of care, because if everything on the site is doing this, it's going to be real weird and distracting. But used tastefully, this is such a nice power up to a website, where it just takes something, you know, like moving between your blog list, and it gives it a tiny bit of motion, right? And that tiny bit of motion can have a big impact, I think.
Yeah. And so this demo right here, we like have it, right? We can do the fade in. If you want to do the fade out, it's really easy.
Okay, let's do it.
So we can like do that in 5 minutes. When you set a value to a property to have multiple values, you can just comma separate them.
Right.
So for example, with animation, you can do fade linear, comma, and then fade out linear. And then with animation range, you can set a second value. So maybe just for convenience, set it to entry, comma, exit.
Okay.
No, so the one value needs to be, the first value is entry, and then the second one is exit. But of course, if you
I
can
got
do
you.
the long version, yeah.
Entry,
comma,
exit.
yeah.
Okay.
And then we need to also create the fade out keyframes, of course.
All right, so we'll copy this.
Yeah.
And we'll just say 2, right?
Set 2, and then the translate needs to be make the number negative. Exactly, that's it.
And I screwed it up because I didn't change the name.
Yeah, and I don't think it will entirely does it. Okay, it does. Yeah, it does work because it has no overlap. Sometimes you need to play a little bit with the fill mode. So what I always do is that the entry animation, I set that one to backwards. So fade linear and then just backwards as a fill mode. And then the end animation, the exit animation, I set that one to forwards.
Okay. And I've seen that before, but I don't actually know what it does. So what is the fill mode in animation?
So the fill mode in animation determines like what should happen when the animation is not running. Which part of the keyframes do you want to show? Do you want to show the before part at 0%, or do you want to show the 100% part, which is the forwards one? Or do you want to set both? For example, if you're at the start, set the first frame, and if you're at the end, set the end frame. So that's both. So you have forwards, backwards, and both, and maybe have a fourth value. I'm not sure, but I only use these 3.
Okay. Okay, cool. So this then is basically what we're saying, and the reason that you do this is that when you've got these 2 animations, if my viewport was shorter, they might collide. Like we'd still be animating in at the same time as it needed to start animating out. And by setting backwards and forwards, we bring them closer together so that they look smoother as they move through.
Well, you're basically doing the opposite. You're saying like when they are at the outer edges, the entry one, that one goes backwards, so it remains at opacity 0 when it's way outside of the view.
Okay.
Yeah, and here it doesn't like really matter because the end frame of the fade one is the same as the starting frame of the fade out one, which is at opacity 0, translate 0.
Right.
But if you have other types of animations, I like to do this one. The entry one to backwards and the exit one to forwards.
Right. That makes sense because backwards means it goes back to the from, and forwards means it would go forward to the to. That makes sense. Okay. Yeah. Got to wrap my brain around this. Okay, cool. So this is very cool. What else should we show? Like, should I wrap things in scroll divs and like make a pile of these, or do we want to create separate pens, or what do you think?
Maybe create separate pens.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, I can do that.
Or maybe we should go like into a little debugger that I built because that one is really helpful. Because with the ranges, like in the beginning, I was also very confused. Like when I read the spec and then when we were refining the spec, I was like, what do these ranges mean? I don't understand. So I helped the tool that I built already gives you a little hint at that. But I also built an extension for Chrome DevTools that allows you to debug it in DevTools itself.
Cool. Okay, so
if you go to back to the homepage, and then at the top there's a bunch of links.
Here?
Yeah, and so one is to see a demo, learn the syntax, which is an article, and then get the extension. Yeah, and then you have a link to the scroll debugger extension.
Got it. Okay.
I'm not sure this will work in Arc. It should.
It's been, I haven't had too much of a trouble with it, but I guess we'll find out. And Ayush in chat was sharing this as well, so it looks like you've You've reached people. Okay, so I've got this
All right.
now, and I am
Yeah.
in here, and I go.
One note.
Okay.
The debugger unfortunately doesn't work with iframes, and everything in CodePen is an
Is an
iframe.
iframe.
So we're kind
Okay.
of like, yeah. So you need to open up your pen in debug mode, and then
Okay.
you can inspect it.
And to do that, I
It's a layout icon at the top. Yeah, that one, and then debug view. So now you have the standalone page. Yeah.
okay.
And if you now right-click inspect on one, yeah. So you have you grab the li, yeah, and then there at the top you have this little tab bar that says styles, computed, layout, event listeners.
Mm-hmm.
Hit the arrow. There's a new one in there that says scroll driven animations.
Oh.
Now if you scroll the page, you can see what's happening. So maybe grab like the 5th li on the page. That's going to be interesting. Yeah.
Okay.
So now you see what's happening. You see a visualization of the scroll port, and now you see also a visualization of the tracked box and the
Oh, that's
actually animated
cool.
element.
And then I can choose my
Fade
animations.
out for the other animation. Yeah.
That's very cool.
And then what's also possible is if you hit the edit values knob there at the bottom right. Yeah. Maybe make it a little bit bigger so that you can see it more clearly. Then it also draws some to and from boxes for the ranges, so these starting positions. And you can also change the values here at the bottom, but this is like straight into DevTools, and it will also sync back to the actual element on the page. So if you change, for example, the percentages, exit 0%, if you change that to 50%.
50%.
And then you need to blur it. Yeah, then the box gets updated, and then the animation will also run at a different point.
And there it goes. Acting. So the rest of them are still standard, and this one is getting real weird because we messed with it.
It's version 1.0, so if you find a bug, please file one.
I think I just gave it really bizarre settings. Let's see, 0.
You need to blur the text field. Yeah, okay, you did that. Yeah.
Oh no, it looks like I just broke it. It's playing
wow.
the other one.
Yeah.
Interesting. Still, a very what a handy tool to be able to see this stuff in action. Like this alone kind of pays for the price of admission there. Because for me, like a lot of times I know what I'm trying to do, and I know what the value should be, but I can't always like visually map the number on the screen to the behavior that's actually happening. So having something that can do this for us that just shows us like, okay, this is the animation you set. Here's where it fires. I'm like, oh, I want that to fire later, so I can tweak the numbers to move it up or down or whatever it is to get it where I want. Yeah, solid stuff. Like really, really good.
And then at the top right there, you also see some numbers. Like you see a number going up from 0 to 1, which is like the full range, but also one just limited to the effect. And then also the actual pixel offset value that you get there.
Cool.
Yeah.
This is great. So this is like the actual element, how much of that view is happening. So you can see it goes from 0 when it's off to 1. And then this one is the full page scroll. So 0 at the very top, 1 at the very bottom.
It's the full range. So when the item is sitting underneath the scroller and then sitting at the top of the scroller, that is the full range.
Mm-hmm. And then this here is the pixel offset. So how far down we've scrolled, right?
Yeah.
Very cool.
Exactly.
This is great. This is like a really handy extension to have.
And that's why I built it because I also needed this for myself. Like I want to do stuff, but I don't know where the boxes are. Help me out. So I built this to help me, and it can also help you. So
yeah, this is great. So let's see. I have here we go. I'm going to just drop a link. I think Ayush already shared it, but if I share it, it goes into a channel in my Discord so that everybody can find it later. This is great. Like I love what we're seeing here. We've got about 30 minutes left, and I've seen you do some stuff that absolutely melted my brain, that didn't look like a scroll-driven animation. Do we have time to put together a rough demo of something like that in the 30 minutes we have remaining?
Sure. Yeah.
All right, I'm going to set up
Let's
a new
go
pen for us.
Which demo are you talking about? I'm curious.
So you did a few. Let's scroll-driven animations style. There were a few that like this one here was really, really cool, and then this one was very, very cool. And this also is very cool. So this one I imagine is probably a little more than I don't have the assets for this one, but something like this or something like this are both extremely cool. This might be the most like tractable in 30 minutes.
Yeah, I was going to say the cover card to fixed header. That's like a pattern that we see on many websites and on apps as well. And well, with CSS we can mimic that. We can achieve exactly the same. So this looks like a really good one.
The landscape and text one, Ayush, you're talking about the cover card here. Let's do it. I'm going to create a new pen and scroll-driven animations with Bramus part 2. Okay. And then I'm going to set up a, let's see, should it be a separate element? Like if I was going to mark this up, I'd probably end up with like my article element, and then I would have for that header, I would probably just use a header element. And then I would have a section for the article copy. Is that going to be compatible with the way that you would build this, or do you want to tweak that? No, this is good. Okay. Yeah. So I'll have an H1, and we'll call this my great article. Okay, I'm going to save this, and then I will share the link for everybody if you want to follow along. And then inside, I'm going to go get some lorem ipsum. And
tip, by the way, in CodePen, if you type lipsum and then hit tab, it will generate a lorem ipsum for you. Or maybe lorem tab.
Oh, look at that.
Yes, that's the one.
That's handy. Okay, so we'll...
But it only gives you like one paragraph, so yeah.
Still handy.
Maybe lipsum.com is handier because it gives you also the HTML elements. I'm not sure.
I thought it did, but this one, I don't know. I thought this one gave you all of the markup, but it doesn't. Whatever. Edit as HTML, and then I'm going to go grab all of this. And we'll drop it in here, and then I'll delete this div. Okay. Oops. Do a little format so that it doesn't hurt my eyeballs. And then, good. All right, so then the other piece that we need is an image of some sort, so I'll just run over to Unsplash, and I am going to make this article about donuts. So we'll just grab a full screen donut image, come back in here, and let's see, should I set it up as a like a background image on the header, or does it matter?
Yeah, I set it as a background on the header element.
So we'll go with
because
the header.
That way you can do background cover, like just to stretch it out a little bit.
Okay, and then we'll do background size is going to be cover, and then why don't we set the height to be, I guess I'll start it at 100 v height, and then looks like I also need to reset the body here. And I think that might be my... Let's see, so that actually, why don't we just have this run as display flex, and then is there? I feel like at some point I got shown a shortcut for align items and justify content as like one property that would just
Place
center
content.
Place content.
Place desks content. Yeah, center. Maybe try display grid, or place content, or place items. It's like one of the.
There we go. So display grid, place content center gave us exactly what I wanted, and I am so happy. This is also magical. So so then let's see. So we've got that's kind of all we need for the markup. We've got our header and our piece, I think. And then if I take my I don't know, we can just do something like background size, background.
Yeah, what I also did is background position 50% or center to make sure that it's lined up.
There it is. So there's our thing. Okay, so then we have something like that. I'm going to set the H1 to have just a little bit of background color so that we'll say like HSL, we'll go with 0. Saturation is going to be 0. We'll just make it black. 0 and say 25. Yep. Okay, then we can make it width 100%. That didn't do what I wanted. Text align center and padding, I don't know, 2 rem.
Watch out with VW, by the way, if you have a system with classic scroll bars. So on macOS, we have the overlay scroll bars that go on top. And with the classic scroll bars, 100 VW doesn't take the size of the scroll bars into account. You can see that in Firefox, so that's a bit of a pity.
There, that's probably legible enough, and let's roll from there.
All right, you want me to walk you through it, or are you going to take a guess of what you want to do?
So I think, I mean, what I would do from here is, after making this breathe a little bit, and then setting a width of 90%. There, that's fine. So what I think I would want is, you know what? To be completely honest, I actually don't know. I don't know how I would do this. So
all right. I'll drop you some clues, right? Let's work on this together. So right now the header is 100 VH in height, but at the very end we only want it to be 10 VH.
Okay.
So that should be part of our keyframes that we want to animate to a height of 10 VH.
Okay, so we want to go to height of 10. All right. And then if I set my animation, it'll be header scroll linear, and animation timeline, I'm guessing, is going to be scroll. So then, that goes bad.
Yeah. So the I run into this as well. So the problem is that when you are calculating a scroll timeline, you are calculating against the total scrolling distance that you have. But if you are now shrinking the header, your total scroll distance is also shrinking. So all of a sudden it goes like bloop, and it's all scrolled.
Yeah.
So the workaround is we need to make sure that this header is sticky. But the problem with sticky, so my guess would be, oh, just use position sticky on it and then we'll do it. The problem is with sticky is that the thing never leaves the actual scroll port. So my solution that I use instead of sticky is I make the header position fixed.
Okay.
So that it always stays into view and it's laid out against the layout viewport.
Okay, so if I'm position fixed. Oh, we
So
were
right
there
now
for a second. Okay, I can't tell if that like popped weird or if that was like a glitch. So I'm going to save it. I'm going to reload it. Okay. Autosave is enabled. The page is loaded. And I'm going to scroll. And I cannot scroll.
No. So the problem with position fixed is that you take it out of flow and you just drop it on top. But then all the text that was underneath has shifted up. So you need to counteract it. And on the text, the diff with the text, you need to say, well, your margin top is 100 VH. So because the text has shifted up, you need to push it back down.
Okay.
VH.
Okay.
And now hopefully you should be able to scroll.
Okay, I can scroll, but I broke something. Did I break something, or is my internet trying to like short circuit on me? Oh, what's up, Finite Singularity? Good to see you. Yeah, okay, hold on. I'm just going to reload again and see if maybe it... Did I break?
You can always right-click and inspect it, right?
Yeah, I think that's...
Or maybe you need to set like top 0 to make sure that it's there somewhere.
Yeah. Here's my header. It is missing.
Yeah, so if you set it to top 0.
Okay. All right. So we're gonna...
Or maybe we should start off and like just remove the animation, for example, to make sure that the header is there.
Okay. No, you should be gone now. Okay, so the header's there.
So now it's all right. Now you've put back the animation, the view is reloading, and yes, it is scrolling. So right now you see the header is actually shrinking from the full size to 10 VH, but it's not really synced. And the problem is that by default, the scroll animation runs if you scroll from the very top of the scroller to the very bottom of the scroller. But we don't want that. We want to like shorten the range because the header should shrink a little bit faster.
Okay.
And that's where the animation range again comes into play. Like with view timeline, we had this entry cover and whatnot. For a scroll timeline, we can just set it to some actual values. And for this one, I'm going to first let you set it to the animation range to entry to just a 0 VH space 100 VH.
Okay. And I just added more text to demonstrate the problem with this, because with a shorter page, it's no problem. It just doesn't scroll at the right height. But with a longer page, look at this. It's just broken. Like my text is disappearing under the header. So this is the sort of thing that we have to fix this. So you said animation timeline. I need to set the animation range, and you said
range, 0 VH space 100 VH, for
100
example.
VH.
So that way you're saying like, hey, header, when you're scrolling the page for 100 VH, shrink to your 10%. Yeah. So this is a very good example. So you've done that, and now it switches to this. This is because of the fill mode. So we need to set the fill mode to forward so that when the animation is done, it keeps that very last frame.
That makes sense. Okay. Oh, wait. Did it actually reload? Is it forwards with an S or forward?
Forward, yeah.
There it is. Oh, my goodness.
Okay.
What is happening?
It
dumped my change. I think either my connection or CodePen is having a moment, because I'm it's like not loading as fast as I'm used to. Okay, so that's doing what I want.
But you can see it's not perfect.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So I've said, like, this was my first idea as well. I want to animate the header if you go from 0 to 100 VH, but actually we need to subtract the remaining height. So we want to animate it not from 0 to 100 VH, but from 0 to 90 VH. So the remainder, the remainder of the finishing height. And if you set it to 90 VH, it should work. Like the text now always stays.
Yeah.
And maybe you can like give it a little padding, the little div to not have the text stick to the header. But this is the demo. There you have it.
That's fantastic. And then if we wanted to make this more like legible, we'd probably go with something like that. And look at our article. Like, this is the sort of thing that we used to spend hours in tutorials trying to get right and to make it not feel weird and not bounce our text around. And like, as somebody who is attempting to build good experiences like this, I remember there were like think pieces all back when Medium was like the way that we talked about web dev for a while there. There were all these great think pieces about why you should never do this because it introduced jank and weirdness and all these problems. And now here it is, non-janky, progressively enhanced.
There's a little note to make with this one. This one is going to be janky because we are animating the height, and animating the height doesn't run on the compositor, unfortunately. So you have the transform, opacity, those run on the compositor. Width, height, and background color don't. Thankfully, though, we have very clever engineers on our team, and like I think about 2 months ago, they said like we should fix that. So they are looking into making this work in the future, so that you, as an author, don't really have to think like, oh, does it run the compositor or not, or like we want to tackle the main cases. So if you want to animate a background color, for example, that should run the compositor. Width and height, that should also run the compositor, because we often do this, right? We often do it.
Right.
We shouldn't be punished.
Yeah. I mean, this is fantastic. So yeah, and then some good notes in the chat about like making sure that we're respecting preferred reduced motion. Here's maybe a question, because not every like prefers reduced motion is not prefers no motion. We're just trying not to trigger vestibular disorders and stuff, right? So where do you draw the line? Like for me, in my head, the things that I immediately think about are like no strobing, nothing like whooshing around the screen. But something like this, is this something that you could keep as reduced motion, or like where would you draw the line?
Of course, as with everything on the internet, it depends is the answer. But with this, I am perfectly fine with this because there's still this direct link between you moving the page and the thing shrinking. So it's like a one-on-one type of thing right here. Whereas if you go to scroll-driven animations, they'll style the homepage, like the cards that they fade in, and they use a view timeline, and they like at the homepage, yeah. And like these little cards here at the bottom, like this is a bit weird, right? Because there's some clipping going on there, and there's a little translation going on there as well. And people would get nauseous of this because it's like a lot of movement going on. So this here on the homepage, I wouldn't do that with reverse reduced motion on. The shrinking header, I think that's fine. Of course, there will be people that say I'm getting nauseous of this. But I think that's one of the safer ones. Yeah.
And I guess the nice thing about something like this is that you can control it. Like if you need to go slower on this, you have the control for how fast it goes, which is kind of a nice bonus as scroll-driven animations go.
Yeah. And that's why this is scroll-driven animations, because there's a direct link between you scrolling and the animation scrubbing backwards and forwards. This is not scroll-triggered animations.
Right.
So a scroll-triggered animation would be you are scrolling, and then at a certain scroll offset, an animation will run on the document timeline, its own time, and you lose control as a user. Because if you stop scrolling, the animation will still run.
Right. Yeah. This is some extremely cool stuff. So we probably, actually, we might have time to do one more demo if you want to. If you want to try
You said 30 minutes, and we did it in 10.
Yeah. So we've got.
That's the cool thing about this API. It's really easy if you know animations.
Yes.
Drop the duration, add an animation timeline to it, and you know how to do it.
So I would like, if you are okay with doing one more, I want to know how you got a scrolling section to move the opposite direction. So I'm gonna pop open one more pen, and
for this one we might need half an hour.
Oh, really?
We'll see how far we get.
Okay, if we can't get there, we'll just go look at the demo. But with Bramus Part 3, we'll save. I'll grab the link. Maybe I'll grab the link. Okay, here we go. Link shared. Here we go, and I'm going to create, we'll say, a main, and inside of this main, I'm going to have 3 sections, and I'll just code up one of them to start. Let's see, do I still have that image on here? So I'm just going to probably run the same image to save us from having to go hunt for them. And if we get way ahead of ourselves and are done faster, we can go get more images. But so
I like that you're putting up an alt in there.
I've just made it a habit. Like I don't create image tags without alt, because if I don't do it now, I will forget.
One tip with that, also set width and height attributes, because browsers use it to like pre-reserve some space for the image while it's still loading, so you don't get like a layout shift. But for this demo, it's fine. You don't need to
actually. It's a good point though, because these are also huge images. So why don't I change this over to be like 600? This is the ImageX API, so we can just kind of set it to like a nice resolution, and then we'll do a width of 600 and a height of say 400, and now we've got nice accessible images that are not going to have weird jank when they load. So I've got 1, 2, 3 of these. I'm going to set up main to have a display of grid. We'll do grid template columns and repeat 3 1FR. I'll set the section is kind of fine, but we'll probably need that in a minute. So I'll set the image to have a width of, let's see, we'll go 2x density. So one of those, and then we'll set the aspect ratio to be, what is that, 3...
You can just type in the numbers, or you can also do height auto, and then it should like automatically adjust the height based on the width and height attributes.
So we got those. And that should get them all to sit nicely together. I am happy. So then we've got some scrolling to do here. We'll and then I guess we can set like maybe, oh no, we don't need that. The sections we would want to be like display flex, maybe with a gap of 1 rem and a flex direction of column. And that way they'll kind of look like a nice scrolling bit. Make them even a little bit more spaced out so we got a bit more to scroll. And now please. I would like to see how to get this to work.
All right. So the trick that I did, this is based on a demo from CodeDrops. They've built it with JavaScript, and then I was like, hey, this looks like something that scroller animations can do. So I went for it. So the trick is that the center, like all three columns right now, they start at the top and they just bleed out the page to the very bottom. Trick is that you want to take the first and the third column and shift these 100% up so that they sit like at the bottom edge of the columns, or what's the name of the element? Of the main element.
Okay.
So the first thing that I did is on the columns element, like on the main element that you have there,
Okay.
I set overflow Y to hidden because we are going to shift some things up and they should be hidden by default. Yeah.
Okay. So then,
And then
we'll do an nth child 1 and nth child. I could probably just set this to be like odd or something, but instead we'll do it like this.
Yeah.
And you wanted to translate nothing to the left and right and minus 100.
Yeah, so if you do minus 100, they are moved out, but the problem is that now they are moved by 100%, so they are like way out of the screen. So you need to calculate a little bit, and you need to say calc minus 100%, but plus 100 VH because you want their bottom part to sit at the end edge of the scroller.
Oh, I got it. Okay.
So right now they are in the good starting positions, right? So the middle column is still at its position, and then the first and the third one are like sitting at the bottom edge. So that's like the start thing that we want to have. While you're at it, by the way, also add a column, at a flex direction of column reverse onto those alt children, because you want their images to also be flipped. Right now we have the same images, so it doesn't really matter, but yeah. So it's column dash reverse that you need.
Oh, column dash reverse.
Yeah, and then the first item will be like the last one in the thing. Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
So that's the basic setup. We have moved them onto their right positions, and now we need to animate them. So on these alt children, you're going to set animation and link it up to some keyframes.
Okay, so we'll do one of these. I'm going to set the animation to scroller linear, and then animation timeline we'll set
Just
to
scroll, because we're taking the root scroller. Yeah.
Okay, and I want this to just go to
yeah, and now we need to transform the elements again. So as we are scrolling down the page, the elements also need to move. You could think about it like for half an hour and then not find it. What I always do there is I make a little drawing and I like draw it on a piece of paper. And the final translate value that I need to get is calc 100% minus 100 VH. So we are basically inverting both of those numbers that we previously had.
Okay. And I have missed a step. What is my step?
Keyframes, animation linear, yes. Animation timeline, yes.
Translate.
Scroll. Let me check what I had here. And then my columns.
Animation scroller linear, animation timeline. I don't need to mess with the range, right? Like the...
No, because you want to scroll like from the very top of the page to the very bottom. So you've maybe on the column set. I'm checking what I have here. I was gonna say position relative, but that one, if I toggle it on or off in my code, it doesn't make a difference.
Okay, so something I'm doing. Let's see. Anybody spot the typo? Let's see, translate.
Add keyframe scroll a trans. Oh no, it's written correctly. Yeah, translate. Oh, no, the direction is correct. I was going to say X and Y are flipped, but that's not it.
Yeah, column reverse. Okay. So that means I am. What if I just make this? Let's try just turning this off, and we'll maybe my. No, that's
So
it.
now
It's
you
doing
see
the
it.
thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so that should be working. And for some reason it's not. Did I capture it inside of my grid or something in a way that would cause it to break with the overflow hidden or anything?
I am trying some things out here locally. Column reverse, translate, animation, scroll, linear. Yeah, that all looks good. Does the animation shorthand only allow 2 values? I see as a question. I know it allows more values, but not the timeline. So that's why we need to do it apart. What if you remove the overflow Y on the main just to test something out?
There it is.
So now it's doing stuff, and is it okay? Like,
it's mostly okay. It's a little janky, so it would need some tweaking for sure. But we are getting the effect, which is pretty dang cool.
yeah. So the problem with overflow Y hidden, and I'm starting to doubt why my demo works because it has it in there, is that you create a scroller that's just not scrollable. So if you I know. So the problem with overflow Y is that you create a scroller that is not scrollable. If you use the scroll function, it will find the nearest scroller. So it will find the sections will find the main element, which has the overflow Y set to hidden, and use that as its scroller. So if you put back the overflow Y on the main, that's step 1. Now the scroll timeline will find that element as a scroller, but we don't want that. We want to track the root scroller. So in scroll, set it to root. And now
we get it. Look at it go.
Yeah, because default, it will find the nearest scroller, and we want the root scroller.
Beautiful.
So that's your demo there.
And this is wonderful. And right in the nick of time because we just ran out of it. Bramus, this was amazing. This was so much fun. I am so blown away by how much this opens up for us. Like, this is a very, very powerful API with so many cool things that we can. I'm just, my brain is overflowing with stuff that we can go and build here. So if folks want to see more, we've shared the scroll-driven animation site. Is there anywhere else that you want people to go if they want to dig deeper?
I think that's like one of the, well, on my blog, I also have a few extra articles that like paint outside of the lines what scroll-driven animations can do. So if you scroll down a little bit, for example, you will find my previous post is like you can use scroll-driven animations to detect if an element can scroll or not, which is like an inconvenient, like an unstandardized use of scroll-driven animations, but you can do that. And if you scroll even more down, you can use scroll-driven animations to mimic a snapped selector. So down. Where is it? Yeah, here.
Oh.
So you can use scroll-driven animations to apply styling to an element that was snapped. So I think that's pretty crazy as well. This is like an inconvenient use, or like a normal use, not normal use of this API. Speaking of special uses of this API, kitsu.dev, run by Roma Komarov. Kitsu, no, it's Kizu.
Oh.
Yeah, and then Roman also has like their fit to width text that also uses scroll driven animation. So he has like a piece of text that adjusts itself to the available size. That's done using a scroll driven animation.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's super
So
cool.
yeah, I would recommend people to check out like all the articles that Roman has written. They are so good. It's amazing stuff. Yeah.
Very, very cool. All right, and with that, we are thoroughly out of time. So one more shout out to Amanda and White Coat Captioning for doing the closed captions today, to Netlify and Vetsu Code for sponsoring and making the show more accessible. And please go and check out the schedule. We've just got an incredible lineup coming up. We're going to do some back end stuff. You want to learn how to build an API that's got rate limiting authentication, etc. James Perkins is coming to teach us about that. We're going to do 3D with a visual editor using React 3 Fiber. I don't know how it works. I cannot. It's going to be wild. That one's at a special time because Michael is in Australia and I didn't want to make him get up at 3 o'clock in the morning. Rich Harris is coming back. We're going to look at Svelte 5 and runes. And Andrew Powell is working on a way to build emails with JSX. I'm really excited to learn about that as well. So please head over here, mark your calendar, join the Discord, get on the email newsletter, whatever the right thing is for you, so that you can follow along and make sure you don't miss any of these. And with that, I'm going to go find somebody to raid. Thank you all so much for hanging out today. We will see you next time.